When the final breath left my parents, the house I grew up in was stolen from me by my own blood. My name is Alicia Hanson, and for 32 years, I lived within the walls of a family where my gender determined my worth. 3 weeks ago, after we buried our mother and father, my older brother, Derek, stood on the front porch of our childhood home and told me to leave. He had the locks changed before the funeral flowers had even faded. He didn't just ask me to go, he told me I was nothing. He said, and I'll never forget his exact words, "This is how it's always been. The men in this family carry the future. The women, they just marry into someone else's name and become a memory." The house where I spent every summer of my life. The house where I sat through the night with my mother while she battled her illness. The house where I watched her fade while he barely showed his face. He gathered my belongings, piled them on the grass, and told me I was an anchor holding everyone down. Because in my father's world, a daughter was never meant to hold anything of value. She was meant to be held by someone else. But Derek had no idea about the years my mother spent in the shadows, building a fortress around me. 8 years of planning, 8 years of late-night meetings with lawyers, 8 years of constructing something he could never demolish. Before I share the moment the will was read, I need to ask you something. If you've ever felt like the world told you your worth was less than someone else's, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Your story matters, even when your family forgets to listen. Now, let's get into how the forgotten daughter walked away with everything. To really understand why Derek was so convinced he had won, you need to know the house we grew up in. My father, William Hanson, was a man obsessed with legacy. He believed that the name Hanson was carried by men, and women were simply visitors. He wasn't outwardly hateful, he just quietly gave everything to his son and gave me a place sitting at the table. William was a successful construction manager. He built a beautiful 4-bedroom home in the suburbs, a nice yard, good schools, and a garage workshop where he spent weekends teaching Derek how to use tools while I helped my mother in the kitchen. My mother, Eleanor, was the soft voice in a house full of hard edges. She had a wildflower garden in the back where she spent her mornings. She had a way of smoothing over the cracks my father left, a way of making his silence feel less like rejection and more like fate. Derek, 6 years older than me, absorbed my father's beliefs like a sponge. When Derek graduated, my father paid for his business degree. When Derek decided to get into commercial real estate, my father introduced him to every investor he knew. When I wanted to become a nurse, my father laughed. "Nursing is just a job until you find a husband," he said. I worked nights at a diner. I took out loans. I built my own life. 8 years ago, my mother pulled me aside after one of those family dinners. She squeezed my hand tightly and whispered, "I've been taking care of you, sweetheart. You don't understand it now. But I've made sure you'll be safe." I didn't know what she meant. I thought she was just being hopeful. I had no idea she'd just gotten back from a meeting with a lawyer, starting the process of a secret war. 2 years ago, everything changed. Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I remember the call like it was yesterday. I was on shift at the senior home when my father's number lit up my phone. He never called me at work. He barely called me at all. "Your mother is sick," he said, his voice flat. "You need to come home. Not we need you, just you need to come home." As if it was my duty. As if it was always my duty. I moved back within the week. I switched to night shifts so I could be there for her during treatments. We went to appointments. I held her hair back when the chemo made her sick. I watched the woman who raised me shrink away. My paycheck dropped by 20%, but I didn't care. This was my mother. Derek visited 3 times in 2 years. 3. Each visit was less than an hour. He'd walk in, smelling like expensive cologne, kiss her forehead, check his watch, and leave. His wife Camille came once, spending the time taking pictures of the house for social media while barely looking at Mom. My father never acknowledged what I was doing. To him, it was just what daughters do. But my mother knew. She started taking trips to the city once a month. She said it was for insurance paperwork. I would drive her to the office, wait in the parking lot, and drive her back home. She always seemed lighter after those visits. Less scared. "You are such a good soul," she told me one night as I helped her into bed. "Whatever happens, remember that you showed up. You showed up for me. That means more than you will ever know." I thought she was talking about the cancer. She wasn't. Let me tell you about my brother and his wife. Derek and Camille lived in a big house in Greenwich, the kind of house with marble countertops and a car that costs more than my yearly salary. Camille called herself a socialite, which really just meant she went to fancy brunches and posted pictures of her handbags on Instagram. She treated me like the help. Actually, worse, she treated me like I was invisible. "Have you thought about a real career?" she asked me at Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. "You can't wipe old people's faces forever." My mother's hand froze on her fork. "I'm a nurse," I said quietly. "I help people." Camille just laughed, a light, dismissive sound, but the moment that cut deepest was later that night. I was in the kitchen getting water when I heard Derek and Camille in the hallway. "Don't worry about her," Derek whispered. "Dad promised me everything. Years ago. She's just here to play nurse until Mom's gone, then she'll just disappear back to her sad little life." "Good," Camille whispered back. "We need this. We really need this." I stood frozen by the refrigerator, glass in my hand. Something was wrong. The desperation in Camille's voice didn't match the designer clothes. I went back to bed and told myself it didn't matter. 6 weeks ago, my mother was declared cancer-free. I broke down crying in the doctor's office. We went for lunch at her favorite cafe and she ordered a glass of champagne. "I want to visit your grandmother," she said, meaning my grandma Helen, who was in assisted living. "Your father has been promising to take me for months. 4 weeks ago, they finally went. They never came back. A truck crossed the median on the highway. The police said it was instant. They said they didn't suffer. I don't know if that's true. I was on the night shift when I got the call. I remember sitting on the concrete steps of the stairwell because I couldn't breathe. I dropped my phone. The state trooper was still asking if I was there. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember driving home. I remember the smell of my mother's wildflower garden when I pulled into the driveway at 3 a.m. I knew she would never tend it again. The funeral was 4 days later. Over 80 people came. Derek gave the eulogy. He talked about Dad for 7 minutes. He mentioned Mom's name twice. Sometimes the people who take the most give the least. And before the reception was even over, before the last casserole dish was empty, Derek pulled me aside. "We need to talk about the house. The flowers were still fresh. You have to be out by the end of the week," he said. His voice was low, so the mourners wouldn't hear. "The house is mine now. Dad made that clear." I stared at him. "Derek, we haven't even read the will yet." "The will is a formality," he said. "You know how Dad felt. Sons inherit. That's it." He softened his voice, trying to sound reasonable. I know this is hard. You were living there, taking care of things. But that was your choice. You could have had a real career. Instead, you played nurse. Behind him, Camille was checking her phone, already bored. Derek, I took care of Mom for 2 years. While I what? His eyes went cold. While I built something? While I made something of myself? Don't pretend wiping bedpans is the same as running a business. He stepped back. 1 week, he said. Then I changed the locks. He didn't even wait a week. Wednesday evening, 2 days after the funeral, I came home from my shift. I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the work. Grief drains you like that. My key didn't work. I tried again, thinking maybe it was stuck, but the lock was changed. I walked around to the back. My belongings were piled in boxes on the lawn. My clothes, my books, my mother's recipe box she had given me. The rain had ruined 2 of the boxes. My nursing diploma was soaked and wrinkled. Through the window, I saw Camille walking across the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, laughing at her phone. She saw me watching. She raised her glass in a little toast and walked away. I called Derek. He answered like he was waiting for it. The house is mine, he said. I had my lawyer check. You have 24 hours to get your stuff off the property. Derek, I grew up there. You don't live there anymore. That's how life works. Maybe if you'd made something of yourself, you wouldn't be standing in the rain right now. I sat down on the wet grass next to the boxes and held the one thing that hadn't been damaged. My mother's wristwatch, tucked safely in my pocket. That's when I found the letter. It was in a box of my mother's things that Derek had thrown out. An envelope with my name in her handwriting. For Alicia, when the time comes. I didn't open it on the lawn. I couldn't. I called the only person I could think of, my supervisor, Nancy, from the senior home. She was a mentor to me. She arrived in her car within 30 minutes. Get in, she said. You're staying with me. Her apartment was small, but it was warm. She handed me a cup of tea and a blanket, and I finally let myself cry. Later, when I could breathe again, I opened the letter. Her handwriting was shaky. She must have written it during the chemo. My darling Alicia, if you are reading this, then what I feared has happened. Your father and brother have shown you who they are. I couldn't change him. God knows I tried. But I could protect you. Contact Evelyn Clark at Clark & Associates. She has everything you need. All the papers, all the arrangements, everything I couldn't give you while I was alive. You are not a burden. You never were. You are the best thing I ever did. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Then I called the number. The law office was in an old brownstone in Hartford. I felt underdressed in my scrubs, but Evelyn Clark just smiled and led me to her office. She looked like she belonged in a courtroom, silver hair and a sharp suit, but her eyes were soft. Alicia, she said, I've been waiting for your call. Your mother spoke about you constantly. She left me a letter, I said. She said you had papers. Evelyn nodded. Your mother and I worked together for 8 years, Alicia. She was one of the most precise people I've ever met. 8 years? Your mother knew your father's intentions. She knew Derek would inherit everything William controlled. She couldn't change that, but she could plan around it. What does that mean? Evelyn folded her hands. It means your mother made arrangements that exist completely outside your father's estate. Arrangements Derek doesn't know about. Arrangements your father didn't know about. She paused, the kind you will learn about at the formal will reading next week. Whatever Derek says, whatever he threatens, don't react. Don't sign anything. Just wait. Why? Her smile was almost gentle. Because your mother is about to have the last word. 3 days before the reading, Derek called. It was 10 p.m. I was in Nancy's kitchen, trying to read a book, not absorbing a word. His name on my screen made my stomach drop. Alicia, he said. His voice was friendly. That was worse than angry. I've been thinking about this situation. Us being at odds. It's not good for anyone. You threw me out of my home 2 days after our parents' funeral. I know. I could have handled it better. I want to make it right. I waited. I've drawn up an agreement. You sign away any claim to the estate, and in exchange, I give you $10,000 cash. Enough to get you settled. $10,000 for a lifetime of being told I was less. For 2 years of sitting with Mom while he was at dinner parties. No, Derek, I'll see you at the reading. His voice snapped. You're making a mistake. You're going to walk out of that room with nothing, and you'll wish you'd taken the offer. Then that's my choice. Fine, he spat. Remember, I tried to be generous. The line went dead. The reading was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the law office. The conference room had a long mahogany table. 6 of us were there. Derek, Camille, me, Evelyn, her assistant, and to Derek's surprise, my grandmother, Grandma Helen. His smile faltered when she walked in. I didn't know you were coming. Grandma Helen was 82 and sharper than most. She wore a navy dress and her silver hair was pinned tight. I was asked to be here, she said simply, sitting next to me. By my daughter. Evelyn took her place. We will be reading 2 wills today, William Hanson's will and Eleanor Hanson's will. They are separate documents. 2 wills? Camille frowned. Why does that matter? Not everything was jointly owned. Derek straightened his tie. Fine, read Dad's will first. William's will was exactly what Derek expected. Evelyn read the provisions. To my son, Derek Hanson, I leave 70% of my assets, including the house. To my daughter, Alicia Hanson, I leave 30% of my remaining assets. Derek nodded, satisfaction spreading across his face. Dad's accounts total about $80,000. You'll get $24,000, maybe. That's generous. Actually, Evelyn said, cutting through his smugness. There is quite a bit left to discuss. William's will represents only a portion of your parents' combined estate. Combined? What do you mean combined? Evelyn opened the second folder. Your mother's estate is separate and significantly larger. Derek stopped smiling. Wait, Mom didn't have her own estate. She was a housewife. Everything she had came from Dad. That is not accurate, Evelyn said calmly. It is accurate. Derek stood up. Dad made his wishes clear for decades. The son inherits. The daughter gets what she's given. He turned to me. This is the embarrassment I was trying to spare you. You're sitting here hoping Mom left you something. It doesn't matter. The real money is Dad's. Mr. Hanson. Evelyn said sharply. Sit down. He dropped back into his chair. Your mother's will contains specific provisions that supersede your assumptions. If you interrupt again, I will ask you to leave. Evelyn picked up the second folder. Now, we address the matter of Eleanor Mercer's estate, including the final section your mother specifically asked me to read aloud. For a terrible moment, I doubted everything. Derek's voice echoed in my head. Mom was a housewife. What if he was right? Victoria was whispering to Derek. She probably just has some life insurance. A few thousand. I looked down at Mom's Timex watch on my wrist. The leather was cracked. She could have afforded something nicer, but she wore this one every day. Grandma squeezed my hand under the table. "Your mother was the smartest woman I ever raised," she murmured. "Trust her." Evelyn opened the folder. Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Clark Hanson. Updated 18 months ago. The testator was evaluated and declared fully competent. She looked at Derek. "The first item is a letter." "A letter?" Derek shifted. 18 months ago, Mom was in chemo. Her judgment was compromised. "I anticipated that concern," Evelyn said, "which is why I have a psychiatrist's written evaluation confirming her full cognitive capacity. I also have video documentation of the signing." She placed a USB drive on the table. She recorded herself explaining every decision. Derek paled. Camille stared at the USB drive. "Your mother was a thorough woman," Evelyn said. She lifted a single page. "To my children," she read. "If you are hearing this letter, then I am gone. I love you both. But love does not make me blind. For 35 years, I watched your father favor Derek. Sons matter. Daughters serve. I couldn't change him. I tried." When Alicia was born, William said, "Maybe next time we'll have another boy." I held my daughter and promised her she would never be next time to me. I watched her grow up, working twice as hard for half the recognition. I watched her pay her own way through school while Derek received every advantage. I watched her come home to care for me, changing my sheets when I was too sick to move, holding my hand during chemo, singing me the songs I sang to her as a baby. Derek visited 3 times. 3 times in 2 years. I do not write this to condemn my son, but to explain my choices. The assets I leave to Alicia are not a reward. They are the balance I could not provide while I was alive. They are what she was always owed. Camille made a strangled sound. If Derek is hearing this and feels angry, I ask him to consider why he feels entitled to everything. Who taught him that? Evelyn looked up. The letter concludes, "Alicia, my darling girl, you are never a burden. You are my heart. Live well, and never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve every good thing." The silence was absolute. I couldn't breathe. Grandma pressed a tissue into my hand. "Now," Evelyn said quietly, "let's discuss what your mother actually left you." First, the house. Derek straightened. "The house is part of Dad's estate. It was always in his name. Actually, it wasn't." Evelyn slid a document across the table. 5 years ago, your parents executed a deed transfer. The property was transferred from joint ownership to Eleanor Hanson's sole name. That's impossible. Why would Dad agree to that? For liability protection. Your father was facing a potential lawsuit. Moving the house into your mother's name protected it. Derek grabbed the paper. "I never heard about any lawsuit. It was settled out of court." But the deed transfer remained. Evelyn produced another document. The property, valued at approximately $650,000, belonged solely to your mother. Camille's face had gone pale. That means she had full authority to leave it to whomever she chose. "And she chose you, Alicia." "No," Derek said. "No, this has to be a mistake." "Your father believed what he wanted to believe," Grandma said sharply. Linda told him the deed was temporary. She never transferred it back. And he never checked. I stared at the deed, my mother's signature. The house where I grew up was mine. Additionally, Evelyn continued, "There is the matter of the irrevocable trust." "The what?" 8 years ago, your mother established an irrevocable trust with Alicia as the sole beneficiary. An irrevocable trust cannot be modified or dissolved without the beneficiary's consent. It exists outside the probate process. 8 years ago, Derek turned to Grandma. You gave her the money. Grandma didn't flinch. I gave my daughter money that was mine to give. What she did with it was her business. The trust was funded with a $400,000 gift from Mrs. Helen Whitfield, Evelyn confirmed. Your mother invested it conservatively over the past 8 years. The current value is approximately $1.2 million. Camille made a sound like she'd been punched. This is fraud. Derek sputtered. Dad didn't know about this. Your father's knowledge is irrelevant, Evelyn said calmly. The trust was legally established with funds that were never his. He had no claim to it. There is one final asset, Evelyn said. Your mother held a life insurance policy valued at $500,000. The beneficiary is Alicia Hanson solely. Derek looked like he might be sick. But I'm her son, he said. She can't just leave me nothing. She didn't leave you nothing, Miss Hanson. Your mother's will specifies that you are to receive her personal effects, photograph albums, and a letter she wrote specifically for you. A letter? Derek laughed, hollow. She leaves Alicia millions, and I get a letter. And the jewelry has meaningful pieces, Evelyn offered. I don't want her jewelry. Derek slammed his hand on the table. I want what I was promised, what I earned. What you earned. I spoke before I could stop myself. You visited Mom 3 times in 2 years. You told me I was a burden while I held her hand. What exactly did you earn? He stared at me. I stared back. Let's discuss the total figures, Evelyn said. The total value of assets passing to Alicia Hanson is approximately $2.374 million. Derek made a strange sound. He tried to stand, maybe to protest, then his eyes rolled back. He crumpled, his head hitting the edge of the table. Camille screamed. Evelyn's assistant was already moving, calling 911. I sat frozen, watching my brother unconscious on the floor. The paramedics said it was syncope, a sudden drop in blood pressure. Nothing dangerous, just his body processing what his mind couldn't accept. 20 minutes later, Derek was back in his chair, pale. He looked at me. You knew. You knew about all of this. I didn't. But you suspected. You sat here looking innocent, and you suspected. I knew Mom loved me, I said. That's all I knew for certain. His laugh was broken. And she didn't love me. I think she loved you, I said slowly. She loved who you could have been. But she saw who you chose to become. Camille grabbed his shoulder. Marcus, we should go. We need to figure out how to pay the mortgage. How to tell the bank we're not getting anything. He looked at me with desperation. Alicia, you have to help me. We're family. Family. 3 visits in 2 years. You're dead weight. Enjoy being homeless. Derek. I said, you kicked me out of my own home. You told me I was nothing. You tried to get me to sign away everything for $10,000. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. You have to understand, he said, his voice rising. I was stressed. The investments. I didn't mean half of it. Then who are you, Derek? Because I've known you for 28 years, and I've never seen anyone else. I'm not going to let my brother be homeless, I said. But I'm not going to bail you out of decisions you made while treating me like I was worthless. I picked up my bag. You get the consequences of your choices, the same way I'm finally getting the consequences of mine. Victoria started to speak, but I held up my hand. Any relationship between us is going to take time. I don't know if we'll ever get there. I walked toward the door. Mom loved you. But she loved me enough to protect me from you. I didn't wait for him to respond. Grandma followed me out. Wait, she said. I have something for you. She reached into her purse and handed me a small velvet box. Inside was her sapphire ring, the one I'd admired since I was a little girl. She gave it back to me when she knew she was dying, so I could give it to you. I slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. There's something else, Grandma said. Even your mother didn't put in the will. Linda wanted to leave your father years ago, but she was pregnant with Derek and stayed. She stayed for you kids. She always regretted she couldn't give you a different childhood. The trust, the insurance, it was her way of giving you the freedom she never had. 1 month later, I sat in a financial advisor's office. We keep the trust invested. Draw only what you need. The life insurance goes into savings. We pay off your student loans immediately. She looked at me. And you keep working. Keep working? I'd expected her to suggest I retire. You love your job. Money shouldn't change who you are. It should just give you options. So that's what I did. I paid off my loans. I kept my position. I stayed with Nancy for another month. I wasn't ready to live in the house. But I wasn't ready to sell it either. Rent it, Nancy suggested. There's no rush. She was right. For the first time in my life, there was no rush. 3 months later, Grandma called. Derek had to sell the house. Camille filed for divorce last week. I was on my break. How do you know? The listing was on Zillow. Camille's Instagram is very forthcoming. She's already rebranding herself as a survivor of financial abuse. Is he okay? He's living in an apartment, still working in real estate, but not at his old firm. The version of me from 3 months ago might have felt satisfaction. The new version just felt tired. I don't wish him harm, I said. I know you don't, Grandma said. That's the difference between you and him. I went to the house that weekend. The wildflower garden had survived the winter. In the early April sunlight, I saw new green shoots pushing through the soil. Life, stubborn and persistent. Grandma stood beside me. She planted this garden the year you were born. Lavender was for protection. She wanted good things to grow around you. I walked through the back door. The kitchen was quiet. Mom's recipe cards were still in the drawer, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her robe in the closet. On her nightstand was a small album I'd never seen. Inside were photographs of me from infancy to adulthood. First steps, first day of school, nursing graduation. On the first page, in her handwriting, "For my bravest girl." She spent weeks putting that together. She said it was her way of counting the good things. I held the album to my chest and finally let myself cry. Not grief. Gratitude. 6 months later, I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program. It was something I'd wanted for years. I used money from the trust. I kept working part-time because I wasn't ready to leave the patients I loved. Nancy and I found a place together. 2 bedrooms, a balcony where I started growing lavender in pots. She said living alone was overrated. We both knew it was more than that. Grandma calls every Sunday. She tells me stories about Mom as a child. I record them. The house on Maple Drive, I rent it to a young family. The daughter asked if she could take care of the garden. I said yes. I said yes to a lot of things that year. To opportunities, to rest. To the slow process of understanding that I was worth more than I was told. My mother didn't give me money. She gave me permission to believe I deserved it. I've thought a lot about why Derek became who he is. Not to excuse him, there is no excuse, but to understand. My brother grew up being told he was special simply because he was born male. He didn't have to prove anything. He never developed the muscles for empathy, for earning what he had. Psychologists call it entitlement, the belief that you deserve things without effort. It's not born, it's taught. And once it's there, it's almost impossible to unlearn. Derek isn't a monster. He's a product of a system that told him he was worth more than he was. And when reality caught up, he didn't know how to handle it. I don't know if he'll ever change. But his change isn't my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself. To live the life Mom wanted for me. To set boundaries. To remember that walking away from toxic people isn't cruelty. It's survival. If you're watching this and you've been told you're not enough by family, by partners, by anyone who should have loved you, I want you to know they were wrong. You were always enough. Sometimes the people who love us protect us in ways we don't see, and sometimes we have to become our own protectors. That's what I learned from my mother. You can't choose your family, but you can choose what you owe them. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about someone who protected you, or someone you wish had. And if you want more stories like this, please hit that like button and subscribe to Winds of Thought. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.